Hello, BookTube. I have a mail haul here, but it's just one book. And at first I thought, well, I'll wait until I have more books, rather than complain that I only have one and just make a whole video about complaining. Then I remembered it's been a while. Once upon a time, I did a video in which we opened one book and went through it, soup to nuts. Not just what we usually do, the rapid fire, here's 10 books, we're going to go through all these in what has been called my book porn. Uh, but rather when we concentrate on one book, so we sift through all the possibilities involved with it from beginning to end. Now I've got this package here, and it's flexible, so it feels like it's an advanced copy. So there's a chance that because going through one book and sifting through all the possibilities wouldn't really work if it was a finished copy of something that I've already read, maybe already reviewed, certainly already have plans for. Whereas an advanced copy, there might be more to it than that. So we'll open this up and just talk about this one book, the receiving of one book. And with any luck, in an hour, we'll have lots more books to go through. So let's see what we have here. For just this, I figured why not make a blessing out of this one thing. What have we got here? Okay. All right. Okay. This comes out in February. At the end of February, it's got a ton of publicity material, just a mountain of it, and that makes sense because it's going to be reviewed everywhere. It is going to be talked about everywhere. It's going to be featured on TV and radio everywhere. So it makes sense that Penguin Random House would want to give me a lot of background material. It's this Enlightenment Now, the new book by Steven Pinker, which comes out in February, and the subtitle is "The Case for Reason, Science, Humanism, and Progress." So let's see. I'm going to read you the back here because we have all the time in the world. We've just got this one book. The follow-up to the groundbreaking "The Better Angels of Our Nature" presents the big picture of human progress. People are living longer, healthier, freer, and happier lives. While our problems are still formidable, solutions are within our grasp. Is the world really falling apart? Is the ideal of progress obsolete? In this elegant assessment of the human condition in the third millennium, cognitive scientist and public intellectual Steven Pinker urges us to step back from the gory headlines and prophecies of doom that play to our psychological biases. Instead, follow the data. Life, health, prosperity, safety, peace, knowledge, and happiness are on the rise, not just in the West, but worldwide. This progress is not the result of some cosmic force. It is a gift of the Enlightenment, with a capital E. The conviction that reason and science can enhance human flourishing. Far from being a naive hope, the Enlightenment worked, as we now know, but it needs a vigorous defense more than ever. The Enlightenment principles swim against currents of human nature, tribalism, authoritarianism, demonization, magical thinking, that demagogues are all too willing to exploit. Many commentators committed to political, religious, and romantic ideologies fight a rearguard action against it. The result is a corrosive fatalism and a willingness to wreck the precious institutions of liberal democracies and global cooperation. With intellect, depth, and literary flair, Enlightenment Now makes the case for reason, science, and humanism, the ideals we need today to confront our problems and continue our progress. Okay. All right, so you can see already, right? You don't need to be a news segment producer to see already what catnip that description is to anybody looking who has a book publicity spot to fill and needs something good, something meaty, something that's going to get people commenting, and maybe that you can bring in an expert panel on. So this book is going to be everywhere, and it's going to make its author a pile of money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Uh, but there are problems. there are problems, and you can sort of kind of see them in that summary, right? Which I'm sure went by its author. I'm not sure that Steven Pinker wrote that, but I'm sure that he read every word of it and approved of it. And you can see the problem with it already, right? Of course, I'll look at it first from the viewpoint of my own profession, which is book reviewing. How do you review a book that fits this description? How do you review it any other way than positively? What do you look like if you find fault with a book that is crying up the good parts of the Enlightenment and the ideals of reason, science, and humanism. It looks like you're against those things. If you criticize the book, it looks like you're against those things instead of being critical of the book, which isn't really fair. Not only because conflation like that just gives book reviewers a bad name, but also because when you look at this description, you can already see problems with it. And if you're familiar with the precursor to this book, The Better Angels of Our Nature, you'll see what those problems are. Right away, you'll see what they are. First of all, some of you might not know about The Better Angels of Our Nature. In The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, he makes a counterintuitive case at great length and with a good deal of research. I'm not in any way writing him off as some sort of off-the-cuff bloviator. In The Better Angels of Our Nature, he makes the counterintuitive case that violence and inhumanity in the human race is decreasing. And that it's decreasing because humans are getting smarter. And I read the first 100 pages of the book when I got it in a galley form and thought, okay, I'm waiting for the shoe to fall because you can't possibly be making this case. No one could be making this case. And then I read another 100 pages and it just kept going. And then I finished the book, and that was the whole uplifting, triumph of the will, exit on Hans Zimmer, theme music idea of the book, was that humankind is getting less violent in the last century because it's getting more intelligent overall, because the median awareness and intelligence is growing. And then that's why things, violence and inhumanity are on the decline. And I was just stunned when I read the book. I just stared at it. I remember I was on the couch on the other side of the room, and I was reading on the couch, and I just stared at the copy that I had just finished in simple disbelief. And it looks like this book is going to continue that staring. I finished The Better Angels of Our Nature, a book that says that humankind is getting less violent because it's getting more enlightened. And I thought, who but a Harvard professor in a gated community could think that? Who on earth, other than that, could think such a thing about the state of humanity? In his book, in The Better Angels of Our Nature, he says that you can see it clearly. What does it say here? The data, right? He mentions instead follow the data. Yeah, and he's mentioned there's a mantra like that running through the first book too. Follow the data. Just look at studies for the last century and a quarter, century and a half, something like that, and you'll see it's pretty clear. All you have to do is step back from your emotional biases, and you'll see it. Absolute insanity. Absolute insanity. How many millions of people died in the First World War and the colonial wars of butchery leading up to it? How many millions of people died in that time? And that was in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. Not only how many millions of people died, but how many millions of people died in new and innovative ways. Horrifying new ways to die. And then there's the Second World War, in which butchery was conducted by man on a scale that had not been seen before in the history of the species. Not just massive, continent-wide warfare with tens of millions of casualties, civilian and military, but also the Holocaust. An intentional effort by an industrialized, advanced, and allegedly enlightened, certainly cultural, Western society to wipe out an entire ethnicity. Done in the cold light of day, surrounded by nations who could have intervened and didn't. And then there's Russia. There's Stalin, who through his own will, out of his own mind, and with an apparatus of thousands of willing conspirators, killed tens of millions of people. Tens of millions of people starved to death, stomped into the mud, shot, beheaded, stabbed, poisoned. There's Pol Pot. There's the Khmer Rouge. There's there's cannibalism, and a million, all in the 20th century. All these things happened in the 20th century. The 20th century, in terms of sheer murderous barbarism, puts every other century that's ever happened completely to shame. And that's just warfare. And that's just murder. What about all the rest of it? That's worse in the 20th century than it had been in any previous century. Well, I mentioned starvation. There was also a greater and greater capacity in the 20th century for simple cruelty. The greater that industrialization advanced, the easier it was for people in control of that industrialization to be brutally cruel to a larger number of people on a more systematic basis. That happened in the 20th century. And at the close of the 20th century, only a few years before Pinker finished typing The Better Angels of Our Nature, the original manuscript, in the years immediately prior to him finishing that, according to World Health Organization, data that is the best that we can possibly get on the subject, there were more slaves in the world than there were at the beginning of the 20th century. At the beginning of the 20th century, slavery was almost gone. It existed very vigorously in certain limited pockets, but as a commerce, it was at a low point. At the end of the 20th century, it was at an all-time high point, and today it is as well. Today it is as well. If you live in a port city anywhere in the Western world that's big enough to have those big flat berth containment vessels that are just stacked with those plastic ribbed industrial shipping containers, if you live in a city that's big enough to have vessels of that kind, and you have ever gone to the dock and seen them, it is statistically absolutely certain that some of the containers that you looked at with your own eyes in 2017 have humans in them who don't want to be in them, who are being moved as traffic, as commerce. There's a booming financial industry in slavery. That is industrialized misery. And it's sometimes generational. And so I finished The Better Angels of Our Nature, and I thought all that about it. I thought, this has got to be some sort of elaborate con game. The minute this book gets to press, the minute the critical world gets a hold of it, it's going to be torn to shreds. You don't even need to be a student of history. All you need to do is be cursorily aware of the records to know that this is completely wrong. This could only be written by someone who just never leaves Cambridge, Massachusetts. And yet, when the book came out, it was beloved, embraced. I've seen, in the years since it came out, I've seen intellectuals and, professional debaters and thinkers on subjects for a wide variety, from science to atheism, cite it approvingly and uncritically as true when it is completely untrue. So naturally, I'm thinking of that when I look at this book. Now, this book looks like it's going to the soft side, the humanism side. So Better Angels of Our Nature looked like it was concentrating more on overt, brutal stuff, violence, that sort of thing. And this looks more like the values of the Enlightenment are being challenged. And the values of the Enlightenment are actually on the ascendant. So there are naysayers who say that they are losing ground, but they're actually on the ascendant. So what do we have here? Yes, here we go. Indeed, instead, follow the data. Life, health, prosperity, safety, peace, knowledge, and happiness are on the rise, not just in the West, but worldwide. Okay. All right. Without any Googling at all, without any research of any kind, you tell me if you think that sentence is true. I have done research, and I'm sure some of you have as well. It is obviously not true. Life, health, prosperity, safety, peace, knowledge, and happiness are on the rise, not just in the West, but worldwide. Is insane. That is an insane thing to say. Countless studies that are obviously going to be studiously ignored by our author. Countless studies done in the last 20 years show that people nowadays, meaning in the last 5 years in which the studies were conducted, are less happy. They are certainly less prosperous, except maybe for the people that Steven Pinker has lunch with. But they are certainly less prosperous. There is safety, peace are on the rise. Safety and peace are on the rise in the 21st century. Knowledge is on the rise in the 21st century. I realize that it's unscientific. I realize that it's anecdotal. Feel free to test the contention that knowledge is on the rise in the 21st century. Feel free to contest it yourself. In fact, I have an easy way that you can do it. I used to do it myself until I got so depressed at the results that I stopped. Come up with 5 simple questions, and I mean really simple questions. 5 of them. Put them on an index card so you don't forget what they are. Come up with 5 totally simple questions. Things to which you would think the answer is completely self-evident. The list that I used to have used to be true or false, it takes the Earth a year to orbit the sun. True or false, the Second World War is currently over. Things like that. True or false, Earth is the only inhabited planet in this solar system. Things where you would think that nobody, this is going to be a source of humor. Everybody's going to laugh at this. Only use a straight face. Hold the index card. And don't ask children. Go to your workplace and ask a random 10 people those 5 questions. But be ready. Be ready for what happens when you get your answers. Knowledge is not on the rise in the 21st century. It is not. Thanks to the eroding educational system standards of the 20th century, knowledge is at a very, very low point in the 21st century, and probably likely to go lower. It always feels localized. I'm sure that's what's going to be the genesis of this book. It always feels localized. If you're in with the right group of people, you're going to feel like knowledge and hope are on the rise. Anyway, so many commentators committed to political, religious, or romantic ideologies fight a rearguard action against the dark currents of human nature. The result is a corrosive fatalism and a willingness to wreck the precious institutions of liberal democracy and global cooperation. All right, so that's our one book. It's Enlightenment Now: The Case for Science, Reason, Humanism, and Progress. And you know, I haven't read this book. I haven't even read an excerpt from it, and I haven't read any of this advanced publicity material. I obviously have a very strong presentiment that I'm going to be arguing with this book, and that I'm probably going to basically fundamentally disagree with a lot of what it says, and yet I know I'm going to want everyone to read it. Because when you think about it, someone in Steven Pinker's position, somebody who's written the Language Instinct, or the Better Angels of Our Nature, that sort of thing, these big, sweeping, socio-philosophical works by a recognized public intellectual, who's writing for popular consumption, who's writing bestsellers on big questions like this. When you think about it, those kinds of things are rare. And so they're always to be encouraged. I always vociferously encourage them. Even if the book itself is what I suspect will be 80% bunkum, I still want people to be thinking about it. I still want them to read it, because it's good. He's a joy to read. So I still want people to read it, and I still want them to talk about it and disagree about it. In fact, once the time comes, we can talk about this book again. Maybe it will convince me. Maybe it's not going to take the tack that I think it does. The back cover jacket copy is not encouraging, but still. So that's I think, a pretty perfect example of why we don't do one book at a time. But it's over now. And the next time we do a mail opening, let's hope it will be just more book porn. It'll be a fusillade of books, and so that it won't be any opportunity for me to batten down and Grandpa Simpson to this extent with any one book in particular. In the meantime, I will sign off for now, BookTube, and allow you to take a deep breath. But thank you. I'll see you soon.